I think over like a period of 5 years, I maybe had like a couple of sessions each year. Until this year, I'd been trying it, but it never really felt achievable. Like I was never going to it thinking, oh, I'll do it today.
It is a level above the other problems that you got done. For me, it's certainly 8C plus.
I don't think outdoor climbing is ready for the level of talent coming in.
The Lake District has some of, I think, the most diversity in rock types of any area I've ever travelled to. It's got anything from like really red sandstone in St. Bees to like really rough gabbro at Carrick Fell. You've got like such a range of different styles of climbing on like really different rock types. It kind of feels like you're going to loads of different countries at once.
I literally think it's a world-class bouldering area. I do think things are far spread and you often have to go on big walks to get to these things. It's not a place you can come and combine lots of crags in a day very easily, but you're rewarded for your big walk-ins and things like that. The boulders, when you get to them, are fantastic.
My name's Aidan Roberts and I grew up here in the Lake District. At the moment we're in like central Lake District, a little village called Rydal. And yeah, I've lived here my whole life. This is my training room. I've spent a lot of time here, probably more time than at the desk. When I was growing up, I didn't have easy access to climbing walls, so this was kind of my climbing fix. We had a friend who was a carpenter who helped me build the board, but with the holds, my good friend Dan Varian, he makes a lot of holds through Beastmaker, and he made a bunch of holds for me to like my first setup, and over the years we've kind of made some holds together, switched out the bigger holds, replaced them with some smaller crimps, and yeah, it's gradually evolved into the board it is today. I've been climbing for a few years, and I went to Eden Rock in Carlisle, and they had a little like competition league, and I think it was my mum who actually spoke to Dan first.
Well, they wanted me to coach him initially, and I did like a month or two of coaching, and I was like, this is, for me it felt wrong because I had always been taken out by local Carlisle climbers, and they just really helped me learn how, like, this is climbing, this is bouldering. So I've had all that experience of being like dragged to crags and like just nudged at things, and yeah, I guess I was keen to help Aidan in that way. And
after I finished school, lots of the time I'd either go up to the climbing wall, or if we were going outdoor climbing, he'd pick me up from school and we'd head off, whether it was down Borrowdale to Carrick Fell. We'd kind of explore the lakes a bit, and lots of time developing new things, finding new climbs to do. At the time, perhaps I never quite realised how much of an impact it was having on my climbing, but yeah, now at this point I kind of realise how beneficial that was.
I give people advice, and a lot of people will say like, oh, well, that's not for me, or like, oh, you know, like, oh, it doesn't count because you're really good, or, you know, like people will create an excuse barrier. With Aidan, I always felt like he went like, all right, oh, really? And sort of went home, and then 2 weeks later he came back and be like, oh, yeah, I've been trying that, actually, I've done this better, and you know, I'll be like, oh, really? Oh. And so he was just always really into anything weird I told him, and he would decide whether it was for him or not.
think between Dan and Greg Chapman over the recent years have done like the majority of the development in the lakes. Greg just brought out his new guidebook, which is, it's great. It's got like, I think like 3,000 boulder problems in, and like he's put in so much work developing all that.
There was always a backwater. So when I was climbing as a kid, Carrick was a rumour. It was like Hock and Calf's, the needle sports venue. And it was like, I remember going into needle sports and seeing Trev and being like, oh, what's this? What's this spot then? Like Greg has been by far the sort of pariah of showing the way in the lakes. I feel like I would totally be a sham saying like, oh yeah, I've been, you know, up and down the valleys. Like I haven't.
There is definitely a lot of development yet to do here in the lakes. I know there's like certain areas which like still haven't really been explored. So there's like loads that I'm keen to look into as well.
It's really interesting because like the rock type in the lakes is actually quite rare. To have like really andesitic, rhyolitic, volcanic rock types, it makes it very frustrating to search for boulders because they're often overfeatured. But there's very, very rarely a blank bit of wall, truly blank bit of wall. So because there's very rarely truly blank bit of walls, they're often covered in tiny edges.
I think pretty much all of the projects I've tried this summer, I initially like sought out with Dan.
This year I've been like, oh shit, well, try this, and he's just been hoovering them up.
I guess my approach has always been like, with like really hard climbing is I'll just get better and to the point where they're like not that hard, which is kind of probably why I've never spent loads of sessions on a climb. Superpowers, I think over like period of 5 years, I maybe had like a couple of sessions each year. I think it was probably about like 9 sessions or something I had on it. Until this year, I'd been trying it, but it never really felt achievable. Like I was never going to it thinking, oh, I'll do it today. That was actually one of the things from this summer, which was like quite significant for me. I think it was actually when it first happened when I went and did Outliers. That was kind of like the start of my like run of good form. And when I went to go try that boulder, I didn't have any anticipation that I'd do it. I actually thought I wouldn't do it. I was going there to climb to see Jack.
Well, I don't know if he actually believed he could do it that day. I think he thought he couldn't do it. He'd not done the first 2 moves. And he then started like tentatively trying them, and he did it from a move into the top. And then he started sitting at the bottom, but not filming, which I think that's like a negative thing to do. So I said like, turn the camera on. Yes, Aidan, come on. Come on, mate, try hard. One more move. Come on. Come on, you know it now. Stay chill. Go on. Nicely done. I think it is the hardest limestone problem I've seen in this country. Certainly of its style, there might be more stretched out sort of climbing, of a very different style on like mag lime or eastern lime, but of its style like almost board-like climbing, it's definitely harder than Wilderness and things like that, which are the other contenders. You always hear Wilderness mooted as Swiss 8C or it would be 8C if it was in another country sort of thing.
So like I wasn't really expecting to do that climb at all. It wasn't that like the expectations of what I could do altered differently. It was more that I like tried to make sure that they didn't dictate how I climbed. Like loads of the projects that I've trying, like before I actually did them, I wouldn't have thought that I could have done them. Like, but I just tried. Like I think it was like a little mind readjustment in that I tried to just not listen to like the voice which is telling you like, you probably can't do this. Inevitably, like it did change a bit as I started doing things which I didn't think I could have done. Like obviously I was like, oh, I'm clearly like a lot better at climbing than I have been over the past few years. So like I kind of, obviously that did change my expectations as well, but I think it was more my like mental approach to it which changed.
If he can get the best he can out of his body, and he's got close to that this year, although I actually think some of the things Aidan's done this year have been more of a realisation difficulty.
That was well good.
I felt good today. That felt so easy.
That was so good.
So his body has been cashing checks that his mind wasn't quite ready for, but I actually think his mind lags behind his body a bit, and when that catches up or even goes ahead and starts thinking, oh, maybe this is possible, that's when like, I think, and that will come, like what is like 22?
Well, after he did that, then he did Isla first go, and then he says he did one lap of shallow groove. I don't know why he said he did one lap of shallow groove, because he literally did shallow groove twice that day. Yes! Fucking what a day! Oh, man! I mean, I know that one's a repeat. You've done 3 of the hardest boulders and I've like, yeah. What a day.
I realised I was in good form then, and suddenly started like kind of touring around the projects which I'd had. I had like a project which I wanted to do on the Boulder Stone, which it's got good moves, but it's like a very tight eliminate line. Kind of that was more like my own project.
Come on. Come on, Aidan. Yes. Good. Really good. Come on.
Come on.
Come on, Aidan. Come on. Go on, pads are good. Yeah, that's it. Come on, Aidan.
Come on.
Have it. Yes.
It was really fun, I enjoyed it, but it's never going to be like a high quality line. It's very squeezed between some lines and you can escape it at different points. So like it's an eliminate, but for me it was quite nice. It was like, because I tried it like a few times, like it was a nice gauge of where I was at.
Yeah, a little crimpy.
I thought, oh, I was all right at crimping, and then I've watched Aidan this summer with like jaws open, you know, stood next to Jack and Jim, and nobody needs to say anything. We're just like, that's clearly the next level. Like it's clearly the next level on small edges and things like that. I would wager, like, I would be amazed if he wasn't in the top 5 in the world on a strong day for like pure crimp strength.
Yeah. Good work.
Aidan's really good at high angle, pinky bent. If it's like that, I think he's by far best in the world. But if it's like that type of crimp, and if the pinky goes straight, suddenly like there's a lot of people better than him on a fingerboard. It's not like he's some sort of levitating messiah of climbing. Like he gets shut down on, I don't know. If we could go through like 5 fairly easy dynos on the grit, and I don't think he'd have a spectacular day. Would he do monk life at Kylo in? There's a very high likelihood he might flash monk life. Certainly do it in a few goes. Would he do catapult on the same day. I'd put 100 quid on it, not doing catapult on the same day.
I got to know a bit about the specifics of like the conditions that were good for each of the projects that I was trying this year. For example, on Copperline, I know if it's a sunny day, it comes into the shade like mid-afternoon. It's quite exposed. It's quite like an aesthetic venue, and it's not like hemmed in much at all. It like faces out over all of Coniston. You can climb on it on very sunny days as long as you go like in the afternoon. Yeah, breeze really helps.
That's like the best hard problem in the lakes, I would say. And also a really good example of like just great climbing at the hardest grade.
It's a face with nothing else on it, and in terms of quality, one of the best climbs I've done.
Come on, man. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Go on, get it.
Come on.
Oh, fuck. Gee whiz. Yes. Made it look easy too. You made a few noises.
That brought a tear to my eye.
Oh, so cool.
Christ
Good work.
almighty.
Yes.
The last month where I did the development of like all of my hardest things, basically, it was generally very short sessions, very few goes, and it was like really high intensity but incredibly low volume. I think like on paper people might think, oh, that's like he's done so much climbing in that time. I probably did like about like less than 10 climbs in like a month, but they all like mattered loads to me. So yeah, a bit of perspective on that. It's like kind of a long, steep face, looks a bit like a board. Got most of the hard climbing at the bottom, and it finishes with like a jump to the lip. I don't think the move is too bad in itself, but you kind of take a swing like over a river basically, and I think it would be quite a gnarly fall if you fall off there. Yeah, definitely didn't want to drop that. But yeah, so that was kind of like a nice little new dynamic to climbing hard. Most of the climbs hard climbs I've done this year have all been very safe. Grading, grading all these climbs has not been my favourite part of it. I think I found it very confusing in that like the grading system feels, has a lot of inconsistencies, whether you're like country to country or area to area. I didn't really know what to benchmark. I was like definitely confused by that. I looked for most of my guidance from Dan because he'd often put more time into those climbs as well. Like he tried them in the past, so like had a bit more of an idea about where they lay.
I think the Lakes has been heavily influenced by trying to chase Gaskin's achievements, and because those have been unattainable, we're not going to be climbing Shadowplay very soon, which is only 8B+. For me, for all my problems, were always ever graded against Shadowplay, and they forever will be, because I would, until that gets sorted out, I'm never going to change how I grade my climbs. Let's call it like weightlifting. For the entirety of my life, if I've been trying to lift 300 kilos or whatever, there's been someone that said, oh, I've lifted 500. And I've gone around all the other areas and I've been like, oh, these 300 kilo weights are pretty light. These are fine. And then I've never been able to like tickle the heavy 500s nearby, but I've pushed and I think Aidan has pushed beyond what I can do with like all the mistakes I've made. You know, like everything's a conveyor belt for like, he started off on a much better level earlier on with some really good talent. I feel like he's really ran with that, and I think he's pulled some pretty hard moves.
So, right, this one's a good one. He's grading. So I guess at the start of the run, and not a lot of people know, but at the start of this little run of form, one of the first hard things he did was probably Little Women. And on the day he did Little Women, he got home and he texted me a picture of a hold in his hand, not at the crag anymore, attached to the rock, and he said, guess what this is? And it was the hold of Little Women, the crux hold. No, not the crux hold, but after the crux hold that enables you to get into the stand. So I assumed when this hold was now gone, I assumed the problem was defunct, but as the conversation went on, it turned out he'd done it. And he later told me it was now 8B, which I think it was already probably, in my eyes, it was already 8B plus Little Women. I think like very good climbers have spent a lot of time trying it, and to do it, they've taken a lot of time. So I think it was already probably 8B plus. And I think when he says things like that, it's now 8B, probably underselling his achievements a little bit. And I think maybe that's continued with some of the tentative grades he's given stuff. And some of, if you talk to him, he is dubious. Even once he's given something a big number, like not a big number, but an appropriate grade, he then almost goes back on it the week later. He's like, well, I'm not sure it is. And it's, for me, unequivocally, surely they are. I think as climbers, we are all, I think we just tend to, certainly for me, I think, and I do think a lot of people do it, they do something and they instantly dismiss it as maybe that's not that hard because I've just done it. I think it's certainly something I do, and I do something, and it could have been like, I could have, before I've been there, I can think, oh, this is the hardest thing in the world, I'll never do this, and then I do it and I'm like, that's not that hard, it can't be that hard. And I think Aidan maybe does that same thing even at his top world-class level.
I was definitely unsure about a lot of the things I've graded, and I might have got it wrong, but it's kind of hard to, I'd really like for the grades not to matter as much, but I can kind of also understand why it's quite important to have them. Ladstones is very picturesque. It's probably about half an hour walk through steep hills and boggy marsh, but once you get there, you get some pretty incredible views. It's quite surreal in that it's one of the few places you can go where you can't really see any signs of civilization, so you can see like one path which we used to get there, but most of it's like you can't see any roads or houses. It's kind of like a secluded location. Definitely one of the things I quite enjoy about the Lake District. It feels like you're a little bit more in touch with nature. Ladstones consist of they're huge boulders. The rock's very sharp, so like creates very small features. The face which Superpowers on is, generally all very small in cut crimps.
Superpowers. The start is very Jade-esque. I won't go into grades, but Aidan did describe it to me as harder than Jade. Those start moves are very Jade-esque, but harder than Jade in difficulty.
You kind of pull on two Gastons, put like in a really quite extreme drop knee. You do like a small move into like a 2-finger crimp, and then reach like almost like full span into kind of like a small edge, which is like a bit of a slot. You have to get it quite accurately. I end up getting it like 2 fingers because it's really wide, and then kind of bring my right foot off and then adjust into 4 fingers.
And it's tension to move feet, and you're tic-tacking on, I mean, they're absolutely terrible holds. Big wide moves on terrible holds with bad feet. And so you get into a high left side pull that's basically rubbish, which is the 8A stand. And yeah, you then basically do an 8A move. And you exit right as Aidan did, but the original Manpower's exited left. He could have taken an easier option even after he'd done the 8A move. He didn't bail off into the left-hand thing. He added hard climbing after that still. Impressive.
I think like the style of the climbing is relatively similar to, well, it's just like very basic crimping. So when I spent some time in like the likes of Colorado, the style of the moves were quite similar. Lots of like very small edges and like moving more statically between them. So I kind of like could compare it to certain climbs I did out there. It's been quite nice in that between all my trips away to around the world, I've always been able to try it in between, so then it gives me a relatively good idea of where it fits in amidst all those different climbs I've done abroad.
Come on. Come on. Yeah. Yeah.
The last couple of years I have travelled abroad. 2 years ago I spent a long time in Rockland in South Africa, which was amazing. That was kind of like, that was the first time I'd really like committed a long trip to like a specific venue. It was after a season where I'd mainly pursued competitions, and then it came to the end of the competition season, just committed like I think 5 weeks out there, and yeah, that was a real wake-up call to me, like how much outdoor climbing meant to me.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Oh, sick.
And then last year I took a trip to Colorado and stayed out there for a similar amount of time.
Nice.
Come on, chill sauce.
Come on.
Yes, man.
Easy.
Come on, you've got it. You know what to do out left. Really good. Stay chilled.
Easy.
Come on.
Nice job. How do you feel? Yeah, it's good.
It was much more picking up on like how much outdoor climbing meant to me, and yeah, I kind of really felt like I got into my stride a little more there.
All right, won it. Come on.
Come on, mate.
Come on. Really good. Nice.
Come on.
Solid, Aidan. Really good.
Come on, mate.
You've got it.
Come on. Come on.
Come on. Nice. You know it. Nice one.
Effort.
There's almost an illusion that all of the world-class climbing lies in different countries or different continents, and it was kind of out of my control this year, but I ended up spending some time at home in the Lake District and felt it took till now for me to really appreciate the quality of the climbing I had locally.
For me, I've always been a little bit of a home bird, and maybe that's becoming more of an ethos this year actually, as people are maybe looking into the back garden more than like off into the distance. For me, it's always been about trying to be happy. If you're way less happy because you don't like fly a Red River Gorge or the Buttermilks or something and have your bouldering trip, then, you know, try it, you know, sort it out and get your trip organised and fly there. But if you can be just as happy climbing somewhere nearby, like if you can have like really nice experiences, go to bed, put your head on your pillow at night and be content, why do you need to book you that plane ticket and, you know, burn all that fuel to get to somewhere that you don't really care about, you don't integrate with the community, you don't have any roots there, you're like a pebble skimming across the surface, just to go and take a climb.
What the climbing has to offer locally is definitely as fulfilling, if not more fulfilling, where it has been for me this year anyway. Right at the end, before I went back down to London, I had 2 days, one where I did Superpowers, and the next day I did Calm with the Trees, the sit start to Calm with the Trees at Tranquilitas.
I've always thought that's an amazing bit of rock as well, like that's why I've sort of tried to show him stuff that I think does the lakes proud, but that also like he would enjoy and suit his styles.
For me, I think, surprisingly, like I said Superpowers was much harder. I think it suits my style much more specifically, like statically isolating on really small holds.
Ooh, okay.
But I'd have a session like 2 days before on Superpowers where I'd dropped the last hard move twice. So I kind of went to that with the real intention to do it, like I knew I could do it that session. So, but for me, like the next day going to Tranquilitas, that was much more unexpected because the last session I had on that, there was still a move I hadn't done, and well, I kind of figured out a new sequence, and basically originally on the second move I went straight from the start hold up to the slopey edge, which you do the final jump off. And I used to go all the way from the start hold into that. And then I found like a really small, kind of crisp 2-finger, like kind of slopey edge, which was much more finger intensive, but just allowed me to like slow down the move a little bit so I could kind of get it a little bit more reliable. And I hadn't actually done the move into that 2-finger edge the session I tried before. And then like, it felt like a bunch of very, very low percentage moves thrown together. I think it's hard to get that last jump reliable as well. So I kind of that was like a total shock when I topped out. That was a bit surreal, but I was like, yeah, I think I reckoned it was probably easier than Superpowers, but for me it was like much more of a surprise for me when I actually did it.
What I think is incredible about the last couple of months is there's been a situation where we've had a really young, talented climber who has really got going, but has the medium around his house to express himself. And then I think globally, how many instances have we ever seen of that? If we take that into perspective, that for me, I was like, oh shit, like you haven't just had a good month, like you've done something that's pretty impressive here.
For me, it is inspiring, but I can see for others how it would be a little bit dismaying almost. His level this last 3 months has been stratospheric. He's almost pushed it onto he's pushed it onto a new level, British climber, in just like a 6-8 week period.
Aidan didn't climb a load of like 8Cs this year or whatever, but what he did do was finally hit a resonance between his potential and what he can actually achieve. And for him, that level is like a world-class level. If you ignore that and just look at the fact that someone that's trained their whole life and has put loads of effort into the sport, into a subset of the sport, managed to find something to express it on outdoors, and then the kind of happiness you get from that is, I think, something you never take away. Whereas he could go to an area which had easier grades or a different style and smash out a load of 8Cs or something. But the two are totally different. And that's, for me, the reason why maybe you don't need to travel, is because if you can find a resonancy between what you're searching for and what you have nearby, then that's when the sport suits you.
There are people developing really hard boulders around the UK, but it doesn't really get put in the spotlight. I think because of that, people will like see all these videos of some super wads in other countries, like talking about how it's the best bouldering in the world, and will think like that's what they need for like a fulfilling climbing trip, and then kind of lose sight of like the actual quality of the climbing they have like nearby, and end up like flying halfway around the world. Like even myself, I like to think I'm somewhat like environmentally conscious, and definitely fell down that trap, and this year would have likely flown halfway around the world to climb on some problems which I could probably have driven 15 minutes from my house and climb on equally good and hard problems.